welcome you from wherever you are joining. In total, we are expecting over 160 concierges and hoteliers participating in this symposium from across the globe. I'm extremely grateful to Alliants for sponsoring and hosting this symposium. For those of you who may not be familiar with Alliants, we were tapped by Four Seasons Hotel Group several years ago to build both a messaging and concierge solution for their brand. Since then, our Alliance Experience platform has been adopted by such global brands as Jumeirah, Nobu Hotels and Restaurants, Exclusive Resorts. But don't worry, we're not here to sell you anything. Today is all about you. Before we proceed, I just need to go over a few housekeeping rules. As many of you have probably already discovered, we've decided to allow you to chat with it amongst yourselves in the chat channel. And being concierge, we know you're a chatty group. That's okay. But we do ask you to limit the chats during each speaker's presentation. And also, of course, to be kind to one another. I'm sure that goes without saying. Also, we have a fantastic support team on hand. My colleagues, Sebastian Burridge and Natalie Kramer, who are going to kind of help keep an eye on that chat area so that if anybody's having technical difficulty hearing or hearing the speakers or not able to see something, go ahead and put a message in chat and they'll be able to reach out to you directly through the chat channel and assist you. In addition, at the end of each of the speakers' presentations, we will give you an opportunity to ask questions through a Q&A. So in all of your screens, probably in the bottom center area, there's a little Q&A area. Feel free at the end of each speaker to post your questions there. On your behalf, I will go ahead and read those questions to that speaker, that presenter, and they will go ahead and respond to the general audience, because I'm sure it will really help everybody that's attending. But we'll do our best to get through every question if provided time permits. Finally, whilst I'm sure many of you will be taking notes, I'm pleased to inform you that each of our presenters has prepared a takeaway, which includes key points from their presentation to help you with your onward journey. We hope to have these emailed out to you hopefully tomorrow, otherwise Thursday at the latest. And you'll be able to kind of use that as a tool to kind of look back on from all the things that you're learning in today's presentation that will help you as you work on your resumes and your interviewing skills and all of that moving forward. So thank you again for joining us today. Without further ado, allow me to introduce you to our co-founder and CEO, Mr. Tristan Gadsby. A little bit about Tristan. After growing and selling a successful startup in the education sector, Tristan transitioned to a corporate career at Andersen Consulting, where he worked at board level with some of the world's leading companies, including Prudential, American Express, and British Airways. He then joined Apodo, a leading travel agency, as their distribution director. Drawing on that varied experience, he recognized an emerging need to support businesses in the digital age. So 11 years ago, he joined forces with Mr. Nick Daniels and established Alliants, now a thriving UK-based consulting firm. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Tristan Gadsby.
Thank you very much, Vickie, and welcome to everybody all over the world. Really nice to have this opportunity, and really firstly like to welcome you to this event. I'm particularly proud of this event because I think it's one of the few things we can actually do that's proactive in the current time. Obviously, we've all been seriously impacted by the pandemic. We're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about potentially some of the positive things we can actually do and take some positive action. I would like to say a massive thank you and a lot of credit to Vickie for this event. It was Vickie's idea. She brought it to myself and Nick only just over a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. So it's really great to see it all come together. Vickie, as you probably all know, has got a lot of industry experience, everything from being a concierge all the way through to being involved in the software side of the industry over the last number of years. So we're very, very pleased to have her on board. She's today brought together some exceptional speakers. I'm not going to introduce them myself, so I'm going to let Vickie do that for us. But really, I hope you all managed to learn something from today and take something away. Please do give us some feedback. We're obviously very, very proud of the industry we work in. We love the hospitality industry. We can't wait to see it back to some level of normality. And hopefully we can all take that journey together, and we'll have this again in a few months' time and things will look a lot more positive. So with that, hope you have a very good session today. I will be around, so any questions, please do let me know. But back to Vickie, who will compare and introduce our speakers. Thank you, Vickie.
Terrific. Thank you. I'm all set. So thank you so much, Tristan, for that wonderful introduction. I'm feeling a little blush now. That was some very kind words. But I'm excited to introduce our next speaker to you. Our speaker, Holly Steele, really requires no introduction whatsoever because most of us that are attending all know Holly. I always like to say that she shattered those famous glass ceilings when she became the first woman concierge in the United States, but also became the first female Lake Leidor member in the United States for Lake Leidor USA. After a 17-year stellar career as a concierge, she segued into motivational speaking. She's done incredible speaking for Disney, American Express, Nordstrom's, just to name some of the companies that have come to her for their guidance, her amazing guidance and intuition and just excitement for customer service. So she was the first person I thought of immediately that I wanted to have her speak to our wider audience. So without further ado, the amazing Ms. Holly Steele.
Thank you, Vickie. Hi, everybody. You know, I found myself sitting here. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina right this second. And I found myself sitting here like getting a little bit nervous, thinking about talking to all of you. Thank you all for coming. I know there's so many people on this Zoom webinar that I know and that I love. And I really appreciate you coming. And it's my deepest hope that you will get out of this today really like to feel stronger and more empowered, because the concierge has been in my life for my entire career. It's something that I love so much, and today is no exception for that. Before we move on, I really want to say thank you to Alliants for putting this together, and to Vickie, and I also want to say thank you to Zoom, because what would we have done these last 9 months without it? I mean, it has allowed us to connect with each other, which is so incredibly important. So thank you very much, which are my 4 favorite words, actually. Let me share my screen with all of you so that I can show you a little bit what I have prepared for you. So let me get into presenter mode here. And we're going to move on. So as Vickie said, most of you know who I am, but if there's people here who don't know me, well, so again, yes, I was the first female concierge, but I was really in the right place at the right time, because I was in San Francisco, and that was where the concierge really started in the United States. And so really, I don't want to spend any more time on my introduction. Just know that for the last 28 years, I've been really teaching people how to think and act like a world-class concierge. So what I'm looking to do here, hold on, sorry. What I'm looking to do here today is to actually really stay real about what's going on, to be real about this psychologically. So what I want to start with is what is referred to as the cycle of grief. Because what's happening is that we're all really going through a hugely emotional experience that's happening for all of us right now. And I want to talk to you about what is called the cycle of grief. And some of you may have heard of the cycle of grief. I learned about it when I was in college. It's from a psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And Dr. Ross talked about the cycle of grief, certainly not about a global pandemic, but she talked about it in understanding what happens to us during the experience of grief and death of a loved one, and that you go through different stages of grief. And right now, what I really want to share and help us understand is that's exactly what's happening to all of us, that we are experiencing the loss of a loved situation, of a loved career, of dreams. And what happens is that we go through different stages of this. And so we really want to look at these different stages. But what's important to understand in these stages is that they're not linear. So you may experience 3 or 4 of them in one day. You don't just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and then it's all over. It's a process, and it's about helping us to recognize the emotions. And I believe that this is the place that we really need to begin. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the stages quickly, but we're going to go through them so that you can look at them, understand them, look at yourself. What stage of grief am I actually in this moment? And it's a way for us to understand and have compassion for ourselves and for each other, because all of us are going through this. I call this time the Corona coaster. Like we're up, we're down, we're all over the place. So let's just take a moment and define the areas, okay? So let's look at this first one, which is about stability. And what happens is that the loss comes on really suddenly. And that's what happened for most of us. And I mean, none of us planned for this. None of us, we're all in shock. I mean, how did this happen? And it isn't just that this happened to the concierge, although it happened to the concierge in a very large degree. It's happened for so many industries and for so many people. And I mean, for my industry personally, since I've left the concierge and I've become a speaker and a trainer, I mean, this isn't like, well, it hurt the industry. I mean, speaking and training, it decimated it. It was just like one day it's there and the next day it's gone. And we're not sure if it's ever going to come back. And so this has happened to so many industries, but the speed of all of it makes it really, really difficult to process. And sometimes what happens, I know it for me for sure, like we just become immobile and we're frozen. We sort of are, we just can't really do anything. And any action actually seems really like impossible to take. But then what happens after immobility is the next stage. And that stage is denial. And I believe that a lot of us are probably still in denial, like an attitude of like, oh, well, this isn't real. This is just going to quickly pass. I mean, yeah, well, guess what? It's not going to quickly pass. It could actually last a really, really long time. And this denial stage, I got to tell you, I know this stage so well. And most of us on the call, a lot of us on the call, had tickets to India. And we had our visas to go to India, and we had tickets to go to India, and we were all ready to go to India, right? Well, I got to tell you, not only was I ready to go to India, I was going. I didn't care. This can't be that bad. It's just a flu. I'm going to go. I'm healthy, right? I mean, my bags were packed. And the only time that I allowed myself to possibly believe that this wasn't going to happen was when Lake Clador canceled the conference in India, right? When they canceled it, but you know what? I was still going to go. There was going to be a small group of people, and we were still going to go, whether there was a conference or not. We were going to create a mini conference. Not until they closed the border of Bhutan that I was going to go after India did I finally say, oops, maybe this isn't going to happen. So this denial stage is so real and so powerful. And then what can happen is after denial, then we get mad about it. We get really angry, like we're furious. How dare this happen? How could this possibly happen? But there is a good side of anger, right? Because sometimes anger can propel us into action. And then we can get into some kind of bargaining. Well, can't we just do this? Like, maybe I'll just come and I'll work at the front office, or I'll, do 3 other jobs, and the concierge is absolutely going to come back. But if I do this, then you'll do this. And right? Shall we bargain? We bargain with ourselves, we bargain with other people. And then sometimes if that isn't really working, this is the stage to be really careful of. We can get depressed. So depression can kick in, and we really need to keep an eye out for this, not just for ourselves, but for our colleagues too. Because if you feel and you find that you can't get out of bed, or that you're really depressed, or there's this pall that's hanging over you, get help. And I just put a little resource in here. It's for free online counseling. I know, like, who knew? But here's a resource for this. And so if it's appropriate, get professional help, because denial and then bargaining and then depression is actually something very serious and something to take a look at. Okay, so then what happens is where we go here is to the next stage, which is testing. So sometimes we just kind of test it. Like, we kind of put your toe in the water. We think, okay, yeah, this has changed. Maybe I'll try this. Maybe I'll get a resume together. Maybe it isn't going to come back. So let me check this out. Let me test something, right? But what happens with testing is that it can lead us to acceptance. And when we are accepting of what's happening, I have a big sign in my office that says, it is what it is. But then I always add to it, but what is it? It is what it is, but what is it? So how have things changed? What are we going to do? I mean, for me, I have to ask myself, how much money and time and effort do I want to spend in a virtual studio? How much do I want to do this? What is this going to be? How do I change? So we're all in this situation of how are we going to pivot? How are we going to change? What are we going to do? I mean, we don't have to look far for all these examples. Look at restaurants. I mean, if they can't have dine-in, do they do takeout? If they can do some kind of dining, do they just do a sidewalk cafe? They have to pivot, figure this out. And that's where we're at. What are we going to do? And when we get from a place from testing to putting our toe in the water, then we can get back to stability, and then we can get into action. So what we want to do here is we want to see if we can get ourselves, I keep going to a quicker slide. What we can do is to get back into action and stability. So I'm just going to put the cycle of grief up here again and just have you look at it and know again, I'm going to say this again, it's not linear. It doesn't go, okay, I've lost my stability, so now I'm in immobility, and then I go to denial, then to anger, then to bargaining. No, you might go all over them in an hour. So it's a matter of understanding. So why don't you write in the chat, where do you think you are right this minute in the cycle of grief? And I have a feeling, because you have tuned in to this webinar, that some of you might be in back to testing and seeing what else you can do, but I'm not sure. So where do you think you are in this cycle of grief? So let's just take a few responses if you'll take a moment to do that. So Vickie, you can read me what people say in a moment, okay?
Yep. I have a testing, I have a couple testing, and I have a definitely testing.
Good.
We do have an anger, which is absolutely understandable.
Right. You bet. It's all understandable. It's
Mhm.
like there's nothing wrong with any of it. It's grief. It's universal. I love that there's so many people from all over the world, because grief isn't a concept that, happens in one country and not another. We're all in this human
Bargaining,
situation.
we have testing mixed with anger.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on in a moment, but I just want to know where you are. And I think that so many of you are in testing. And so, what I want you to imagine for a minute is that most of you, and hopefully at some point all of you, are in the stage of stability and taking action. Because the thing that is passionate for me right now, and I know this with every fiber of my being, because I really know the concierge. I know how they think. And because of that, I know this. I know that concierge can take for granted all of the amazing skills that it takes to do this job well. It's so natural for us, and we've been doing it for so long. We just think it's normal. But guess what? It is not normal. You are so valuable in the workplace, and that is really what I came here to talk to you about and to share with you. I really want you to get how valuable that you are. I actually made a 2-page list of the transferable skills of a concierge. And so we're going to go through these 2 pages, and then we're going to go back and I'll just talk a little bit about each one. But I really, really want you to pay attention here and think about this, because we don't think about it so much. But I can tell you absolutely that everyone would love to have a team member with these skills. A concierge is resilient. They can bounce. And so right now you need to really express this resilience. You are resourceful. You can figure things out. You don't need to know all the answers. You totally know. The answer is yes. What is the question? That's a concierge thing, right? You know that. You're agile. You can move from one thing to the next thing quite easily. You don't get totally flustered. You are problem solvers. And actually, not only are you problem solvers, you like to solve problems. Guess what? Not everybody is like that. And you're solution oriented. You stay in yes. You live in yes. You figure out how to make it happen. Instead of telling people why you can't get something done, you always tell people, let me get back to you on that. Let me see how I can do it. This is a fabulous trait to bring into the workplace. You're multitaskers. You can do more than one thing at a time, and you're personable while doing it. You love people, you love to help, and you enjoy, you're social, you're personable. You know how to customize something so that you actually know that it's not one size fits all, that you know how to customize and you know how to personalize, and you actually want to, and you persevere. You're goal oriented. You know you need to get something done, you follow it, you're goal oriented. You're a master observer. You actually pay attention. You look outside. You know what's going on all around you so that you can put all of that together to come up with a solution. You're not just this. So you're actually putting your hands like this so you can see all of it. And you're a team player, because everybody knows that a concierge is not a person, a concierge is a team. So you actually understand how to be on a team. You're flexible. You roll with it. Obviously, each day is not exactly the same. I mean, it has a theme, but you roll with what's going on, and you're curious. So, curiosity is something that also should not be taken for granted, because many people are not curious. I like this concept. You understand escalation. I'm going to go back to that one. you have an ability to not take everything so personally. When I teach my classes, I call it putting on the turtle hat, having a little bit of a hard shell to not take things personally and sticking your neck out, and being a little bit slower to just respond with negative triggers, because you can separate yourself from a situation. Again, this is an unbelievable skill. You're innovative thinkers. You don't just, this is not just like a something where, look at, there's nothing wrong with engineers, but this is like that's much more linear. What you do is you think innovatively. And what is innovation? Innovation is coming up with something extraordinary to do something ordinary. And that's what concierge really know how to do. They also think strategically. So they understand how to put something in its right place and in its right order. They know how to triage. So, which means, of course, that you know what to do first and then what to do next and the most important things. These are all the things that we know from being a hotel concierge. And I really want you to take this with you so that you really get it. Believe me, 28 years ago, when I left my desk at the Grand Hyatt, I didn't know that I had all these skills. I was just like, I had this burning desire to go teach this amazing thing. But now I know, I really understand. This is brilliant. I've always known that the concierge is brilliant. I've always believed it. It's fueled me. But now I've broken it down so all of you can understand what you bring with you to an interview. It's really amazing. They're speedy and efficient. You can do things quickly and well. And you understand relationships. You're relationship centric. So that's important to you. And all businesses want to create relationships in order to create loyalty. You know how to do that. For you, it's natural. For most people, it's not natural. You're reliable. You show up when you say you're going to show up. You're responsible. You get back to people. You know how to take ownership. You know how to follow up. You know how to follow through. Wow, it's amazing. Oh, and this one, questioning and listening. You get that. Oh, this sounds so glib, doesn't it? Questioning and listening. Well, it is so not common. People don't ask the right questions in order to get information and then hold on to that information and sift it through so that the solution can be a part of what they heard in the information. And you actually know how to listen. That's probably the rarest skill of all. I call that listening is an act of generosity. It's so amazing. Most people listen to just respond, but a concierge knows how to listen to come up with the right thing for the right person. A concierge has an innate ability to be helpful. Oh my goodness. This is so fantastic for working within an organization and with customer facing. And you're experienced designers. You know how to design an experience, again, to make it personal. And you know how to read people's cues. And so, really, this is what I want you to really understand and get your value. So, let's go back to just a few of these, okay? Let's go back to understanding escalation. What do I mean by that? So, escalation is when somebody's getting really angry or they're getting really upset. The thing about a concierge is that not only do they know how to handle people who are upset and to work with them and to take care of them, they know how to work with difficult people, but they also know how to work so that the escalation doesn't actually even happen in the first place. But when it does happen, a concierge, an experienced concierge, knows how to de-escalate an escalated situation. Part of that is by not taking things personally. Part of that is the emotional intelligence that is actually a requirement to be a good concierge. Part of it is understanding that the way to accomplish relationships is to focus on the emotional need of the person that they are interacting with, and to concentrate on the emotional needs first. Let's talk about innovation, being an innovative thinker. You know, I had said that innovation is doing something ordinary in an extraordinary way. I got this particular story when I was working with American Express. I was lucky enough to work with the Black Card Concierge, and this happened to a Black Card office in Germany. And I love this story so much because it really shows how a good concierge can think innovatively. So a Black Card holder was on a train in Germany, and there were no seats. And so they called the office of the concierge for the Black Card. And they said, can you get us a seat on the train? There are no seats. And they didn't mean an actual, seat that you buy a ticket for, like any seat. The guy wanted to sit down. So, and they were going to he told them where the next station was, and he wanted them to meet him there with a chair, right? Well, they tried all of these different places to figure out how to get a chair to meet the train. And they were really kind of going a little bit crazy to figure this out. And somebody said, well, near that next train station, there's a mission. So they called the mission, a mission that takes care of homeless people, right? And they called for this Black Card holder and said, is there any way that you have a stool or an extra chair that you could meet this gentleman at the next train stop and give him this seat? And if you do, he'll make a donation to your mission. And they said yes. And they actually went to the train stop, met the guy, gave him the little stool. Everybody was happy. He made a donation. That is innovative thinking. When you know how to do that, you're incredibly valuable to a workplace. So, it can be fun, it can be interesting, but don't forget that this is really something valuable. To be speedy and efficient. There's a quote from a concierge from Chicago named Abigail Hart. I put it in my textbook on the concierge. And it says, it's one thing to get a document translated into Braille, but it's quite another to get that same document translated into Braille within 24 hours. That is what a concierge knows how to do. So I thought that was really, really great. And let's go back to the idea of thinking innovatively. And also, when you think about bringing your whole self to work, that is such a skill. See, like you bring your whole self, all of your experiences as a concierge, that's your whole self, but also all your experiences prior to that. So one of the things a story that I love, it came from a woman named Joanna Husk, who I worked with at the Grand Hyatt. Some people walked up to Joanna and they asked where they could purchase French Regency costumes. So Joanna knew that there was an opera shop in San Francisco and she could have sent them to the opera shop. But instead of doing that, she decided to ask a question. Remember I said questioning and listening are not glib, they're real. So Joanna asked a question and she said, well, may I ask what you're going to use the French Regency costumes for? Are you going to a costume party? And they said, no, we're opera singers in Brazil and we can't source French Regency costumes in Brazil. So Joanna, who used to be a costume designer actually, she said, oh, well, how about this? How about we source the patterns for you, and then you can just go to a material shop, and then you can, buy the materials, or you could buy the materials in Brazil, and we can get the patterns. And they said, well, we're leaving tomorrow. And Joanna said, are you going back to Brazil, or are you staying in the US? And they said, well, we're going to New York. And she said, oh, well, okay. We'll get the patterns and we'll just send them off to you in New York. And it saved these people thousands of dollars. It was completely innovative thinking, and it created loyalty and relationships and a story, which concierge love so much. So I think that that's enough to understand that you really have these skills. I'd like to actually have you think of your own examples of that. Knowing so much that we live in yes, because most people live in how they can't do it and how it can't get done. And concierge live in how it can get done. And they're constantly open to learning and growing. And in all of these years that I've been consulting with every industry you could possibly imagine, like from Bank of America to NASCAR, right? I promise you that every single industry, every single one wants people with these kinds of skills. Everybody wants this. And so I just want to show you what some industries are that would be interested, and where, if you're in action and you're in stability and you're looking. I just made a list of some industries where you might be interested. So real estate and law firm, these are all industries that I've worked for and that want people who can think and act like a world-class concierge. Banking, retail, high tech, all kinds of technology companies. We know people who've gone into financial firms and been the concierge at the financial firms, call centers, medical practices who have concierge medicine, hospitals, office buildings, apartments, senior living, nursing homes. It is running the gambit. And there's probably so many more things on this list that I haven't just thought of. But what I really want you to really remember while you're exploring, okay, is that even though you have all these skills, I don't want anybody to show up arrogant, because we can't be arrogant around it, but there's some sort of a balance between humility and arrogance. And I think where the balance becomes between humility and arrogance is confidence. And that's the place that I want you to feel comfortable with, because it's not like the old world concierge, with the glasses at the end of their nose and going, yes, may I help you? I mean, that isn't what you're coming with. You're coming with an understanding that you really have a tremendous amount of skills. The idea being actually that when you walk into an interview, I want that person to think, whoa, this is my lucky day because a concierge is coming to interview here. But somewhere between confidence and arrogance is the sweet spot. And when you're looking at new worlds beyond the hotel, there may be some sort of a stigma with sales. I know it was for me. I used to think, I'm not in sales, I'm in service, I just am in service, not in sales. But when I got this particular paradigm shift, like, whoa, sales is service and service is sales. And this is the perfect segue to what we're going to do next. I have a little treat for you. I asked my dear, dear, dear friend, Diana Nelson, who was the former concierge, worked with me at the Grand Hyatt for the entire time that we were there together. And then when I left, and Diana was the chef concierge, and Diana was also the president of USA Les Clés d'Or. And after, I can't remember, was it at least 20 years, Diana, that you were the concierge? You were recruited by the Four Seasons to run their residences. And she took all of her brilliance as a concierge and she used that with the residents at the Four Seasons. And the company Millennium took notice of that, because all of the residents were like, whoa, this is amazing. Who is this woman? She's awesome. And they asked her to get a real estate license and to learn how to do that. And so anyway, from that, she became a broker and for the fanciest building in San Francisco. And now she is working again with Millennium and the Four Seasons. And she's had an esteemed career. And a lot of it is due to taking her skills as a concierge and bringing them into a totally other industry. So Diana, I'm introducing you now, if you want to say hello. And the big question that that I want to ask you, Diana, and is this. It's how did you use your concierge skills to be successful in this industry? What did you actually do? And before we move on, Vickie, do I need to stop sharing so Diana can be seen on this? I think I do.
Yes.
I'm going to. Okay, great. So now, Diana, hi. So
Hi.
why don't you just tell us a little bit about the way that you took these brilliant skills that were natural to you and used them to become so successful. We're proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Holly. This is really making me feel very good about the future for people that have all these amazing skills. And I think one of the things that keeps popping up in my head is the bravery of concierge. I mean, when you think about when you step behind that desk at 7 o'clock in the morning, you are the expert and you are the person who everybody, you have no idea what your day is going to be like. I mean, you know that, for example, at the Grand Hyatt, you spend a good deal of time, you know, telling people where the cable car is, booking airport shuttles, booking transportation, etc. But you didn't ever really know if there was going to be something wonderful and magical that you would be able to do for someone. So, you know, you might be doing dinner reservations, and then you'll have a woman come up and tell you that she is really discouraged because she is a smoker and she can't quit smoking. And so I found her a hypnotist. And believe it or not, it actually worked. She wrote the president of Hyatt a letter, you know, saying how wonderful I was. And the reason it was because of the empathy and because I had quit smoking, and I sent her to the same hypnotist that I had. So I just think that your abilities transfer so well to real estate. So a little bit about my going to work at the Four Seasons and wound up being a broker was that I exhibited bravery and I just kept trying and trying. I had no knowledge of real estate when I started this job. I thought I was just going to be the director of the residences. And by opening myself up and using all of the skills that I had as a concierge, I have really established myself as in the top 5% of real estate brokers in San Francisco. And I'm proud of that because of what it took for me to really explore this. I loved my job at the Grand Hyatt. I loved 23 years. I had just been reelected president of Clay Door. It was such a jump to do that, but every bit of me said, go ahead, give it a try. And I think that all of my concierge skills translated so well to managing and to real estate. And so since that's really my area of expertise, I think that I wrote down a couple of things that I think if anybody is interested in real estate, how they would go about it. I don't think there's too many paths like mine because I'm doing it right now. And the company that I work for really recognized the skills that I had, and I kept building on it and building on it. And part of that is because I was the first person that Holly hired back in the 70s, 1977, I believe it was. And we had spent so much time educating people about what a concierge did that if they would come up and say, can you do this? As long as it was legal and kind, we would say, yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. And that's exactly what I did in creating this position of the director of the private residences at Four Seasons. So if you are interested in real estate, I think that the thing you need to do is first to find a niche that you like. You know, is there a certain neighborhood that you like? Do you like, there's so much information about and so much competition in terms of realtors. You can find a realtor that you think is your style. I would reach out to them and offer to come and help them with certain things. Now, licensing is an issue. So you would just reach out. You can do it with social media, LinkedIn. I know many, many people that start out in real estate that they are an assistant to a top producer in San Francisco or the Bay Area, and that's where they get their foot in the door. You also would need to study, because there are a lot of legal requirements, of course, being a realtor or being a broker, and educate yourself on the market and what kind of people, or what kind of real estate you want to sell. Do you want to sell condominiums, high-end condominiums like I do? Do you like a particular neighborhood? Do you want to do vacation homes, second homes? Just study on that. The other thing is your sphere of influence. Now, everybody has, this is how you get started in the real estate business, is you start by letting all the people that are in your sphere know what you're doing, and you'd be amazed at the amount of referrals that you'll get from that. You want to reach out to like interior designers, money managers, but the concierge qualities that I have is I'm a very hard worker, which you have to be in real estate. And as we all know, we have to be a hard worker to the grueling 8-hour, 10-hour days that we put in. And flexibility, you know, as Holly has mentioned, people, you know, we can move with all of those different qualities that one would have to make your day and your guest day really memorable. And never taking no for an answer, and really exhibiting the kind of qualities that the Four Seasons brand is famous for. And so that's really how I approach that. Is Holly there?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Diana. I think that that it's really great because you gave really specific examples, and that's what I was really hoping for you to do. So that's wonderful. And I guess, Vickie, do you want to do a little Q&A now? Because I think the timing is perfect, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you both. First of all, I mean, the comments that are coming in through the chat channel, they're absolutely thrilled with both of you. I see one that says, thanks for the inspiration, Diana. And of course, everybody loves having Holly. So first of all, thank you both. You just absolutely did brilliant. And thank you for sharing your insight and your knowledge and your experience. So all of you, I know that you found your chat channel, but if we can, there's also a Q&A area in this bottom center of your screens. If you'd like to post any questions for either Holly or Diana at this time, I'm happy to post questions on your behalf to our lovely speakers. Thank you. So we'll just give them a moment here. I actually, while we're waiting, I have a question, Diana. So I understand that you were at the Grand Hyatt, but you started selling for the Four Seasons. How did that all transpire?
So Stan Bromley, who probably many people on the call know, he was at the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C. He had originally been in San Francisco, and he really wanted to come back to San Francisco. So when the developer Millennium Tower Millennium Partners was coming back to San Francisco, they brought Stan back. And I happened to run into Stan at a retirement party for an American Airlines special services person. And he asked me if I would come and open the concierge desk. Well, Stan had like a really tough reputation, and I was blissfully happy at the Hyatt because they treated me so very well. And so he said, well, we have these residences, and I don't really want to manage the residences. He said, maybe you could do that job. And so and then it was supposed to be just like a transitionary job. And, you know, the .com bust was just occurring. The hotel and the residence opened 2 weeks after 9/11. So, you know, a pandemic now, hey, been there, done that. You know, this is just another obstacle in my life right now. And so they brought me on board and sat me down, and it was kind of like being back with Holly and I, because it was like when they asked me if I did something, I said, yeah, I do that. I do that. Yes, I do that. And that's how it happened. So I will say, though, that, you know, the people were very kind of like, why did they hire a concierge to do this instead of finding somebody who knew something about real estate, which at the time my knowledge was very small. And but everybody was so impressed. You know, people love the stories about concierge. And I think some of the things that I got the most accolades for were getting them into really difficult restaurants. You know, that's what it kind of comes down to a lot.
Yeah.
You know, what I want everybody to get about this, because I don't think maybe they understand. Running the residences, if you looked at the time, the org chart was Stan Bromley ran the hotel. That was at the top of the org chart. Right next to Stan's name, not under, next to Stan's name, said Diana Nelson, who was the manager of the residences. So she went from being the chief concierge at the Grand Hyatt to on the exact same line of the org chart as the general manager, this famous guy from the Four Seasons. So don't just skip over that, because that's pretty cool, everybody. And then it was like, huh? But now it's like, why wouldn't you hire a concierge?
Yes.
That would be like,
exactly.
huh? It's, you know, so that's great. Okay, if we have any other questions, we'll be happy
We
to.
do. We actually have, several.
Okay,
So we have for either Diane or Holly, what one impact relationship that you had that mentored you to where you are today? I hope I read that correct. What one impact relationship that you had that mentored you to where you are today?
So, well, one of them is on the screen right now. That would be Holly. The other one would be Stan Bromley. And the third one would be one of the principals at Millennium Partners, Sean Jeffries, who, you know, is a young man when I started this. So now I had 23 years at the Grand Hyatt, and now I've had over 20 years in real estate. So almost equal as far as the time, but Sean has become a very, very good friend, and he just kind of supported me in all of the craziness. And some of the things that I did at the beginning were like kind of not very bright. Like the building was wide open, you know, there was no curtain wall or windows. And I decided that we should bring brokers in, and Sean said, sure, go ahead. Well, you needed to get a permit from the city, didn't do that. You needed to make sure that people were like in the appropriate attire, sort of did that, and just said sorry afterward, you know, beg forgiveness instead of asking permission, more or less.
Well, I think when you're the first in that field, you do kind of have to,
Yeah.
you know, make the way for the rest of us. Absolutely. Absolutely. So Holly, how about a question here? How did you find the transitioning to other industries?
Well, it took a while, I have to say. I mean, it wasn't like just completely slam dunk. I mean, one of the things that happened, of course, and Diana's involved in this, I started my business, Thank You Very Much Incorporated, with 3 years, I think, before I left. And so actually my very first job was working for Trump Airlines, believe it or not. And I would take time off and go do these things. And so I had these jobs, and I opened up the Laja Coeli and the Manali Bay Hotel in Hawaii at the, you know, doing training. I was just like totally flying by the seat of my pants and making this stuff up. And finally, after close to 3 years, Diana and the rest of the team said, you got to make a choice. It's like, are you going to do this business, or are you going to work with us? Because we've been covering your butt for 3 years now. So make a choice. So I did. And I did leave. Although what happened was Diana became the manager, and I stayed for another, 6 months or something. It was so hard to leave. And, you know, one of the things that for me, and, you know, this isn't all that inspiring, but, you know, it was hard because as a concierge, everybody answers your calls. And when you're trying to sell your services, everybody was in a meeting. And that first year was hard. I refinanced my house. I did everything I could possibly do to survive so that I could make this happen. And I didn't know that people were in a meeting, because they were never in a meeting when you're a hotel concierge. Everybody takes your call. No one's in a meeting. And so I went from being a school teacher to a concierge. And so I had no idea that people were in meetings. Like, oh, okay. Ooh. But, you know, I mean, it took a long time, but you just persevere. And still today, I mean, it's like, you know, some things work, some things don't. And you just keep on doing it because what else are you going to do? You just keep going.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we just have 2 more questions. So the first one is for Diana. It says, Ms. Nelson, how would you describe and compare your real estate job to that of being a concierge?
Oh, that's a very good question. I can tell you for the first few months especially, I just missed being a concierge. I missed the camaraderie. I missed all of my colleagues and the immediate satisfaction that you would get. But then, you know, as I just opened myself up to all of these other people, and certainly financially being in real estate has been very good for me. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. And then there's another one here. That was inspiring, as I am currently using my time off in furlough to get my qualifications in property management and letting in Scotland. Oh, Scotland. Hey, Tristan, it's not me. I'm not leaving. What, if any, qualifications, certifications have you had to acquire to continue your role?
Well, I actually don't have a property management because the Four Seasons is really the property manager for these buildings. But I really wore many hats at the beginning, especially after 9/11 and the .com. It was one of my jobs was people wanted to cancel their contracts, and we had started out being 80% full. So what I had to do was kind of bring the property management and the standards from the Four Seasons and make sure that that was delivered flawlessly in order to keep the people that were in contract and to also then recruit more people. And so it's been it's the building, the Four Seasons residence right now is 20 years. And they've renewed their contract with the Four Seasons. And I think I told you, Vickie, on the other day when we were talking that I am now selling the new private residences at the Four Seasons, which is, you know, going to open in January. But obviously we've had delays, et cetera, because of COVID.
Yeah, that's so inspiring though. That's amazing.
So I'm sorry, I kind of got off point there, but there are property management companies and licenses that would vary from, you know, place to place. So I would say that that's a very good way to establish yourself. If there are requirements that people are looking for, then you should test for those and get licensed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll be wrapping up here, but I do want to share, there was a really nice comment in here. It says, Holly, thank you for the tips and insight on concierge skills, as they are so transferable, but we often overlook this.
Yes.
Right. That was, that was what I was really hoping. I do want to share one other really quick thing.
Yeah,
because in that idea of like who inspired you, the first time that a company asked me to write a company-wide program for them, I mean, I had never done that. And I was like, oh, they're never going to hire me. She was down in Palo Alto. They're from Utah, but she happened to be visiting. And she said, would you meet me? I wouldn't even meet her all the way to Palo Alto. I said, I'll meet you near the airport. Like, I wouldn't even drive the whole way. I was sure they weren't going to hire me. And then, so then they did. And when she did, like, to hire me, do a company-wide program for like a resort company that was in 3 states. And I kept saying, are you sure? Are you sure you want me to do it? Like, I've never done anything like that. Are you sure? She said, yeah, we're sure. Because we want what you have. We want what you have. And that's all those skills of a concierge. And so that really was the beginning for me to understand that I could write programs for whole corporations. And so you have it within you. You already have it. So just use it with confidence. So thank you so much for coming and for being part of this. And thank you, Diana, for sharing your success.
Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And for getting up so early. Bless you.
Getting up so early. Okay, so I have to go to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And
thank you very much. I really enjoyed
all
it.
the attendees. Thank you both.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was wonderful. We're so delighted to have Holly's insight as well as Diana's. That was wonderful to have that shared. We will be hearing from our next speaker, Richard, in just a moment. I thought if anybody needs to make a convenience break, feel free to do so. The next two speakers, I hope you'll stay on. I wanted to approach this from two sides. We're going to be discussing CVs and resumes. And the reason that we're kind of looking at both sides of this is because the CVs are more common in probably in the UK and throughout Europe, whereas resumes are more common in the United States. And although there are some things that are quite similar in creating your CVs and resumes, there's also a lot of differences if you're applying in Europe versus or the Middle East versus applying in the United States. So our first speaker who's going to address some of the more common do's and don'ts of CV writing is our next speaker, Mr. Richard Owen, who I will introduce to you in just a moment, but we'll make sure everybody has a moment to run away and come back. I love how everything's so proper here in the UK that we call it a convenience break.
Vickie, why should we just check that everybody can hear me okay and can see my screen?
Yes, thank you. I can see you and I can see your presentation, so it's perfect and I can hear you. So I think we're all going to be just fine. So what we'll go ahead and do, hopefully that was enough time. We will move forward. All right. Well, I had the pleasure of meeting our next speaker, Mr. Richard Owen, when he was chef concierge of a beautiful hotel in Boston, Massachusetts. I was trying to remember this earlier today. I think it was about 14 years ago. My goodness. Since then, I have had the pleasure of following Richard's career from concierge to guest service manager, to recruiter, to owning and operating his own job placement agency. So Richard is a prime example of someone who has successfully made that transition from concierge into another industry. And I hope you'll all join me in welcoming Richard. And I would like to now introduce you to Mr. Richard Owen. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Vickie. And hello, everybody in the UK and across the globe. This is a really exciting time for me. So thank you, Vickie and Alliants, for inviting me. I truly feel really inspired just by listening to Holly and Diana. It was great. It just reminded me of when I used to be a concierge, and there's nothing in this world that makes a fantastic concierge. Like, it's a really memorable time that I spent 10 or 15 years ago working as a head concierge. It was a really one of my favorite top jobs. I left my role probably about 8 years ago, moved back to London, and I worked in 4- and 5-star hotels. And then, working in hotels, as you know, is just, you work 50, 60 hours a week, and you have to work back-to-backs. And I was approaching a certain age, and I thought, what could I do differently? So I did move into the corporate sector and offering a concierge service. But what we'll do is we'll talk about what makes a great CV, and then we can go into the Q&A, and I can tell you how I made that transition from being a head concierge to a corporate concierge, and then finally owning my own recruitment company. So yes, Vickie mentioned that obviously I've got a lot of experience in hotels. I started my own hospitality recruitment agency probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And I generally work just outside of London, and I work with hotels and corporate companies, mostly operations managers and concierge and things like that. So what we'll do is for the next 15 or 20 minutes, Vickie will give me a sign to tell me I'm talking too much. So we've got probably about 4 or 5 slides to go through. Now, I know Michael is going to come up next after me about 4:30 my time. So the guidelines that I'm going to tell you is purely just the UK and the Europe CVs, because over in the US, the CVs are quite different. So the similarities will be, some of them will be the same, but some of the things I'm going to say only really focus for the UK and Europe. So what makes a great CV? So good first impression, standing out from the crowd, compelling content, and well-defined structure. So for me, as if I recruit for 1 or 2 different positions, I could get probably 300 to 400 CVs for one applicant. So it's a lot to go through. And generally, you do look at all the CVs, but typically you do spend about 6 to 10 seconds on one CV. So the first page is just exactly, you need to make it precise, you need to stand out, avoid the spelling errors, the common mistakes. So first impressions is key, standing out from the crowd, and then the content is the most relevant. So what we'll do is I've broken the CV down into about 6 sections. So you've got contact details, personal statement, core skills and key achievements, and employment history, education, and then hobbies. So as you can see, on the first part of the CV, you're going to try and make it about 2 pages. If it goes into 3, that's not a problem. If you've been working in different positions for maybe 10 or 20 years, perhaps you would say you'd only list your first 4 or 5 positions, and then maybe put, after 15 years, you could say from 2005 to 2010 or 1995 to 2010, I worked at a number of different hotel companies and health positions, because really it's only the most recent roles are relevant. So for example, your contact details. So you need to put your name. Now, generally, you only need your first and last name. You don't need to put your middle name. You also need your address. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, people would list their address of their street, their number, their apartment, their flat. You actually only need to put the town or the village or the city, the county, the state where you're residing. And then the other thing that you need is 2 things most important, is a contact telephone number and an email address. So for the contact telephone number, you don't need to put your home phone. Most of you will have a mobile number. So you only need to list that phone number, not your home phone. And then of course, an email address. Now, the email address, if you have one that's perhaps 10 or 15 years, say for example, Red Sox fan at Gmail or Hotmail or things like that, you need to make it more formal. So for example, my email address is richard_owen@hotmail.com or Yahoo or MSN, just so it looks more formal rather than like an informal email address. And then lastly, under the contact information, you need to put your LinkedIn profile. So your LinkedIn, for those of you who don't know what LinkedIn is, it's a free service to use. And I call it LinkedIn Facebook for professionals. So for me as a recruiter, it's my Bible. Everybody, all my contacts are on there. Everybody pretty much is on LinkedIn. So if you're not, it's free to join. There are different membership services, but what I'd recommend is just getting a free membership, and you can create your profile, you can add a picture. And this way, when you've uploaded your CV onto job boards or you're sending it into an application, if you include your LinkedIn, a link to your LinkedIn profile on your CV, recruiters and hiring managers, they are so nosy that they will just click on your LinkedIn profile and see you and look at your CV at the same time. So that way, if you create the LinkedIn to your profile, if you'll get a notification through LinkedIn to say, Richard Owen from Elton Recruitment looked at my profile, and then you can add them to your connections and start making that connection. And also, if you think about it, when you work in a hotel, and especially when you work as the concierge desk, you are meeting so many VIPs, board of directors, senior PAs and EAs. All those people are on LinkedIn. So they become vital to your network, because if you are trying to transition out of the hospitality and try a different field, they are going to be able to potentially be like, oh, you know what, Richard helped me 5 years ago with an amazing last minute request that my boss wanted. And you can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking for a job. This is what I'm looking for. So it's a great tool. So I definitely recommend doing that. So what I'll do is I'll flick between the two slides so you can see a sample CV. Oh, that's too far. So you can see, I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but I think obviously the session is being recorded, so you can always go back to the session. But you can see you've got your name, the town, the phone and email, and then LinkedIn profile. And then, so next is the personal statement or personal profile. So what you need to do here is keep it precise, concise, a unique, short paragraph. This is your chance to shine and stand out from other applicants, and ensure that your details and your skills and experience are relevant to the job that you're applying for. So it's like combining all your responsibilities that you've done in your previous roles into a very short paragraph. So it can be tricky to do, but it probably would take about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. What I would do is just write 4 or 5 bullet points and then combine that with your experience. So for example, Holly brought up some really good transferable skills. She brought up a list of, I wrote some down, so innovative, effective, creative, thinker, take ownership, all those words that Holly came up with, those could be built into your personal statement, because this is what you do on a day-to-day basis. So after you've created your personal statement, read it over a couple of times, and then you've got a foundation of what you want to do and what you want to put it on paper. Once you've done that, you will then be able to read it over a couple of times, and don't be afraid to say, I've been working at the same hotel for the last 20 years. I am now looking for this position, or I'm looking to make the transition to a building manager or a corporate concierge. So for example, you could see on this CV is a sample CV. So this gentleman, he was actually a previous concierge at a hotel probably 4 or 5 years ago, but he made that transition to become a building manager. So he looks after a building. So you can see in his personal profile, he's told a little bit about what he's doing. He's a building manager. He makes sure that everything's functioning properly. He works with various contractors, including security. He always provides best practices, reduces operating costs and productivity. So it's a very snapshot of what he's done. So once you've got your personal statement, you then need your key skills and key achievements. Now, I think this is where it's different in the US, because you would generally used to list your education before you would go on and list your employment history. But again, if you've got your contact details, your personal statement, and then the key scores and achievements. Now, for me, when I'm looking at a CV, somebody that's got 10 years experience or 20 years experience will definitely have some key achievements. Excuse me a minute, I just need a drink. Sorry about that. So when you list your key skills and achievements, think of a challenging obstacle that you've overcome. Pick 3 or 4 from each role that you've had, and then choose the top 1 or 2. So this can be ranging, say, for example, if you've dealt with any VIPs and last minute requests, or when you've had to put on a big surprise or a wedding, or someone was getting married, or when you've won Employee of the Month, or even better, Employee of the Year, or perhaps your team and your department reached, got high scores on a mystery audit. So something like that would be a great key achievement. So you can see that here on the sample CV, it's listed building management, real estate, security, facilities, concierge, customer service. These are all great key skills, but actually you need to make sure that you elaborate on that. So for example, building manager, you've got 10 years experience of working in a building. How many floors, how many square footage, how big is the building? So if you're in a hotel, how many stars was the hotel? How many requests did you deal with on a daily basis? That type of those type of key skills. So once you've done your personal profile, once you've done your core skills and your key achievements, you then move down to the employment history. So the employment history is also very key. This is where you need to pick out, again, 4 or 5 bullet points of your employment history. So look at what you've done over the years and then pick from don't necessarily pick it from the job spec. A lot of people generally will copy and paste the job spec and just put it into their CV under their responsibilities. And it never looks right. You can always tell from a CV if a candidate has just looked at their job spec, copy and paste, and moved a couple of them over into their employment history. So you need to pick 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on the role, the responsibilities that you did, and also, again, your key achievements. So say for example, if you managed a concierge team, if you managed the porters, if you did any reviews or disciplinaries or one-to-ones, there's various different responsibilities and duties, but try and highlight the most 4 or 5 top ones that you would recommend, that you would see that fits to the job that you are applying for. So you can see that the building manager, obviously, health and safety, compliance, assisted in preparation of monitoring and recognition of service charge and budget, complete administration tasks, including filing, inventory, ensure compliance was in line with health and safety, undertook regular building inspections, complete reports. So all that, I know straight away that this person is very compliant. He's used to doing administration, and that's one of his strong points. So again, look at maybe 3 to 4 of your key responsibilities over the last 4 or 5 jobs that you've had, and pick those and then elaborate those into your employment history. You also need to make sure that you start off with your employment first. So the most recent role that you're in. So you always make sure it's the same font as well. So you've got either the date, the role, and then the company. So even if you've been furloughed or if you've been made redundant, you can put in parentheses reason for leaving due to COVID or was made redundant. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Even if you had a short-term role, maybe if it was 6 months or 8 months and you found a full-time position, you can put in parentheses reason for leaving, found a permanent position. It's not a problem. And don't worry about having gaps, because nowadays people, hiring managers and recruiters are okay with people having gaps in. So don't worry about that. How am I doing for time, Vickie?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're fine. As I imagine, hobbies is where we're going, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So lastly, we've done the employment section. Now you've got the education and qualifications. So here, list the schools and the colleges that you've attended, the degrees, if you went to technical school, any courses that you've taken, if you're members of Les Clés d'Or or any concierge association, if you've done any learning and development, this would go after your employment history. So again, qualifications and education. So this candidate's got a bachelor's degree in marketing and economics. He's IOSH and health and safety trained. He's qualified first aider. All those things just put under the education and qualifications section. So, perfect. So the next slide would be 3 key CV writing takeaways. So for me, correct spelling, make sure your CV is relevant, and also make sure your key achievements stand out. So I use a software called Grammarly on my CVs or in any communication that I'm doing. I'm dyslexic. So for me, using Grammarly, using spell check, getting a few people to check it, it's not a problem. And I think when you prepare your CV, get 2 or 3, whether it's a friend or a family member, but don't send it out to 5 different people because everybody's going to have a different opinion on it. So generally 2 to 3 people, run it through Grammarly, which is free to download. Or the other thing that I do is I put it into a Word document. And for me, I put it into speech to text. So I copy and paste it. And there's a button in the Word document that says speech to text. And it then reads it to you. Because often when you're writing out your CV, you might miss words out or it just might not sound right. But when you've got somebody reading it back to you, you can go in and make the corrections. There's nothing worse than making spelling mistakes. So always make sure you run it through spell check. You don't need to, and again, this is where Michael might advise this, but in the UK, the recruiters and hiring managers, you don't need to see put a photo on there. There doesn't need to be referencing on there. You don't need to see, URL links or things like that. So generally, your age, your religion, whether you're married, whether you have children, it doesn't retain to your CV. And lastly, if you want to put on hobbies as well. So generally, some people decide at the end they want to show a little bit of what they like to do outside of work. So whether that's if you like biking or cycling or cooking or going to the theatre when we can, don't be afraid to put that on there. It just shows a little bit of a personality and what you like to do outside of work, if that makes sense. And that's it. I think, how are we doing for time? Oh yeah, 24 minutes. So I know I had about 15 minutes, so I overran slightly, Vickie, but yeah.
No, it's all good information. Thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate that. And I'm sure everyone attending appreciates it as well. So and you had some really good points because I never knew that about, you were saying, I think in Word document that there's a program that will actually read it back to you.
Yes, and that's key. It's in Word, Microsoft Word. So if you copy and paste it, and you literally, one of the options, let me have a look. One of the options is speech to text.
Okay.
So
yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a great tool to have. And often, as you know, sometimes, Vickie, I miss words out a lot. So from that point of view, it's a great free useful tool.
Right. No, that's great. So thank you. First of all, that was really informative. And like I say, CVs can be very different to resumes. So that's why it was important to hear both both sides of the pond, if you will.
And if anybody, it was a very short presentation, but if any of you have any questions or, you've got my LinkedIn information or they want to reach out to me, if they want me to look over their CV, it's not a problem. Just send it to me and we can hold a quick Zoom call. I have lots of time. So yeah, it's not a problem.
Oh, that's really generous of you. I hope everybody heard that. And you'll find Richard's information was on the registration where he signed up, but you can also look for Richard Owen in LinkedIn and or Elton Recruitment. And that's a really generous offer. Before we proceed, are there any questions from the panelists? We have a really nice thank you for all the helpful tips, Richard, in the comments. But I personally have one question for you. What do you think of these companies? I know there's services out there that you can pay to actually write your CVs for you.
Yes, I have mixed feelings. It really depends on the level that you're going for. If you're going for an operations manager or a director role, yes, there are companies that you can get it as low as, £59 or £99 up to £400. But before I would do that, I would try and do it yourself. Take some, contact me. I'm more than happy to help you. You can go on and find videos on YouTube or LinkedIn. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you vet the company and they're not just going to put a few extra words in that you've already added in. So make sure that you get examples from them.
Yeah, good advice, good advice. I mean, because it's, I can imagine it's a little daunting, especially for some who have been out of, haven't really had to have a CV like in 2 decades,
Exactly.
And even knowing where to begin. So this is all great information. And just as a reminder, within the next couple of days, everybody who registered, we will be emailing you the takeaways and a lot of what Richard has talked about in his talk this afternoon will be offered to you in the kind of in a bullet point, I believe, presentation
exactly,
that we'll be able to send to you with all the great tips that he's sharing. Well, thank you again so much.
And thank you for everybody listening. I can see a lot of you are connecting with me on LinkedIn. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn and I can happy to help.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, thank you so much. So actually, this is perfect timing because we are now going to introduce our next speaker, who is a wonderful, wonderful gentleman by the name of Michael Johnson. So Michael is probably one of the only people that's speaking today that does not have hospitality background unless he surprises me. But just to give you a little bit of background that I do know about Michael is that he is a senior partner at Lucas Group, where he works to place human resource directors into, so basically the people that you interview with and hire, he's the one who places them in some of the largest firms on the west coast of the United States. Michael understands the changing ways in which businesses are reviewing CVs and resumes these days. He'll be providing you with some invaluable insights into getting your resume noticed. After all, half the battle is just trying to get somebody a human being to actually read your resume and then hopefully feel compelled to bring you in for an interview. So without further ado, Mr. Michael Johnson.
Thank you so much, Vickie. And I have to say, I feel privileged to be part of this event. Holly, if you're still listening, your enthusiasm and passion for this community got my heartbeat going early this morning in Los Angeles. And I loved listening to Diana's transition story and hearing Richard's story of transition, and also hearing his advice on putting together a CV for employers in the UK and throughout Europe. But anyway, I'm just thrilled to be here, and I do not have a hospitality background. I have traveled extensively. I've been to, I think maybe 54, 55 countries, and I have always relied on the concierge to get a sense of what was important locally, what amenities were available in that hotel, what was the great place down the street, something that I shouldn't miss before I left town. And I don't care how many apps are available, there's nothing that matches that human connection and having somebody who really knows. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and see if I can get you there. Let's see. Can you see the presentation? Are you able to see that, Vickie?
Sorry about that. Yes, I was trying to get to my unmute button. Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I've called this presentation "Write a Resume That Gets Noticed," and it's important that it gets noticed not only by hiring managers but also by the systems that many companies use now to filter through the responses that they get, especially when they've posted a particular opening. So that's where we'll start. And I wanted to comment on, where Holly began her presentation, talking about the impact of what we've all been through, the storm that has been this global pandemic, and the resilience that I think we need to carry forward. And I liked this quote from Power of Positivity: "Be like the flower, survive the rain and use it to grow." I think thinking differently at this time and being conscious of how you can move forward and take the challenge and actually grow from it is going to make all the difference. And being that having that resiliency that Holly talked about. So I want to talk a little bit about resumes versus CVs. And I will say that most resumes in the US are competency-based documents. They are really a marketing tool, a way of quickly showing yourself to a prospective employer. They're comprised of skills, notable achievements, work experience, but you want to put it in a way, as Richard was saying, that the reader will quickly grasp who you are, what skills you might bring to them, and be able to make a decision if they want to move forward to contact you and actually set up a conversation. In the US, a CV is typically used more in an academic or scientific or medical, those types of fields, because they tend to be credential based and more focused on education, what certifications you've achieved, what research you've done, what projects you've completed, and that type of information. So they're used a little differently in the US. The most common would be resume. One difference between a US resume and an international CV might be that a resume may contain less personal information, although Richard said that even in Europe, there's less need for including information like your marital status or your age or your other kinds of identifying information. In the US, that information is actually, there are anti-discrimination laws that prevent employers from making employment decisions based on those kinds of things. So they would rather that you not put that in your resume in the first place. So you don't need to add a photo or include any kind of personal information, simply the identifying information. So if you haven't had a resume in years and you're sitting down to actually start this process, my advice is that you start by creating a list of everything that you've done and create a list of all those transferable skills that Holly talked about. It will help you as you actually start to create that document, that resume document, if you have this extensive list, you're not going to put everything into the resume, because a resume should be fairly brief, and it should be something that's, you're able to quickly scan and read. But it's helpful to take inventory and to really think through, what is it that I've done and what are the skills that I possess. I thought that Holly captured so many important skills, and I want to emphasize one area that she touched on, and that was sales. As concierge, you have professionally promoted, the amenities of your properties and the services nearby, and the things that make your place special and worth visiting. You have also been somebody who has asked really good questions and listened and really thought about, how do I best serve this guest? How do I best solve this problem? That is, whether you think of it this way or not, that is the core of sales. That is good salesmanship. Good salespeople are listeners. They're figuring out what the problem is, and they're presenting solutions. And so I think, some of the alternative careers that have been discussed are really good ones for people who possess the kinds of experience and skills that you innately have or have developed through your career. So I encourage you to take that inventory and create lists before you get started. When you're ready to put a resume together, then think about the format that you'd like to present your skills and experience. There are some common formats that I want to just mention to you. I haven't shown examples of these, but honestly, if you Google resume template, you will get many, tools that can help you actually put the resume together. Probably the most common is the chronological resume, or actually it's a reverse chronological resume, and it focuses on work experience. And this is the most common in the US. And it's common because honestly, it's what a lot of employers prefer. And it's something that they're able to quickly, read and scan and get a sense of your work history. So chronological is one type that you might want to consider. But there's also functional resumes, and these are structured around skill sets and abilities that you have. Those are highlighted over the career history. And these can be, a functional resume might be a good option for somebody who maybe has had some, has made career change, maybe has some gaps in their history. So they're not wanting to focus so much on the career, the progression of the career in a linear way, but to focus more on a skill set. You can also have a combination of these two. And that's what I probably, given that you're thinking about, in some cases, you're thinking about career change, you might want to think more about a combination resume that has functional components, but also eventually has a chronological listing of your work experience as well. But what I wanted to spend a little time talking about is targeted resumes. And what the concept behind that is to create a resume that that you can alter a little bit here and there in order to have it be relevant to a specific job that you're pursuing. So it's a resume that's been targeted for a specific opportunity that you're pursuing and that you want to go after. Resumes have to be honest. They have to be an actual, a reflection of what you've really done. But there are times when you can emphasize one part over another, depending on the job that you're seeking. Or you might use language in the resume that is reflective of the type of position that you're pursuing. So it takes a little extra time because you have to kind of think through, what do I want to present in, for this particular opportunity with this particular organization? Maybe you're pursuing something with a nonprofit and you want to emphasize some of the mission-driven volunteer work that you've done, or there may be components that you put into the resume or take out depending on what the opportunity is. You don't have to rewrite the whole thing every time. It would be too stressful, take too much time, but you can maybe look at the summary or the profile section of the resume at the top of the resume, and you might rework a sentence or two in order to have it be, use the language of the type of role that you're pursuing. Beware that when you start tweaking or making edits to have a targeted resume, that you might accidentally do something that changes the format or creates an error. So you've got to be sure to proofread and make sure that you don't inadvertently do something that's going to be adverse to making that application. Okay, so what should a resume include? It's very similar to what Richard talked about with the CV. At the top of your resume, you should have your identification information. So your name, your cell phone number, your email address. I agree, it needs to be a professional email address. You should include, in the US, you don't have to have a full address, but I would have the city, state, and zip code. And I'll talk a little bit about why the zip code is important in just a minute. Many people will start a resume with either an objective statement, I'm pursuing this as the next step in my career because, or a brief profile, a brief summary of your experience. And that was similar to what Richard was talking on the CV. Education, in this graphic, education is listed after the objective or profile, but honestly, I should have shifted it to after skills. Typically on a resume, education is at the bottom of the document. However, if you don't have a lot of work history, or you have recently completed your education, you have an exceptional school or something, you may want to list education higher in the document. It's not a hard and fast rule, but typically education is after work experience. Again, work experience, you list it in reverse chronological order. You include the company, the position, the dates that you held that role. Many resumes now have a skills section. Sometimes this is actually, even before the work experience, and this might be something that you consider. This is part of that, combination type resume where you're highlighting specific skills, and then you're giving the reader a sense of your career history. As Richard said, hobbies and interests are an optional add-on. I wouldn't dedicate a lot of real estate space on the document to it, but sometimes it makes a difference. If you are, it could be hobbies and interests. It could also be, activities, or, you're volunteering at the homeless shelter. You're really passionate about, animals and the care of animals, or whatever it is, something that might give the reader a little sense of you and your personality. Okay, so keywords, this is a key point in my presentation, is it's good if you can, when you've thought about those transferable skills and you've created that list, it's good to take those keywords and incorporate them into your resume document, because it gives, again, the reader a sense of what your abilities are and who you are. But it also can be really important if your resume is being first scanned by a computer system. So many companies, especially companies of any size, have applicant tracking systems. They have computer systems that scan the resume, and they're trying, those programs are trying to figure out, is this applicant, they're trying to establish whether there's a relevancy to the posted job. And so they will, they operate by looking for keywords and phrases. And so if you think through, what is it that I'm applying to? What did the job posting say? I agree with Richard. You should never cut and paste sections of the job posting into your resume, but you want to look at the language and think about how you can portray your background in a way that's going to have relevance to that particular position. So you want to think about everything from, titles, avoid acronyms, maybe you've worked as, your title's been concierge, or maybe it's been, guest ambassador or whatever. You might want to work in both of those terms in the course of your resume in order to make sure that, again, either the system that's screening or the person reading the resume is going to quickly, grasp who you are and whether there's actually a connection or a potential fit with the position that they're looking to fill. It's also important that you quantify, inform, and contextualize. And what do I mean by that? If you have the ability to quantify your accomplishments, so and contextualize those in the context of your industry or your the organization that you were working for, you should do that in the document. Your resume should not just be a list of your responsibilities, but it should really be something that highlights what you've accomplished. So for example, you might say that you and your team helped the property achieve a higher guest satisfaction rate than the other properties in your area, or you achieved recognitions. You were awarded for being exceptional in some capacity as a concierge. Anything that shows achievement or accomplishment of that nature is going to be important to include. You want to measure and communicate the level and the volume and frequency and scale and impact of your work. So how did you impact the organizations that you worked for? The more that you can communicate that through, quickly through the document, through the resume, the better. And give some context. A lot of resumes, people assume that everyone knows who you've been working for or what the responsibilities, what you've done. And it's not always the case. So for example, Vickie introduced me and said, I work as a senior managing partner for Lucas Group. Well, maybe some people in the US know Lucas Group, but most people wouldn't. So in the resume, I would want to make sure that I include a phrase that says, national executive recruitment firm with, 500 recruiters in 17 locations or something, just some phrase or two that gives the uninformed reader a quick sense of the context that your work, your experience, a context of the employer, a context of what you've achieved, a context of how you made an impact. The more you can do that in the resume, the better. Okay, and a quick comment on format. I said that you can use a template, resume template. There are many, many, many out there. Some of them have lots of graphics and exciting things to make the printed document look really, really good. But if you are sending your resume through, you're emailing it in response to a job posting or something, I would suggest that you also create a very simplified format of that resume, just a simple Word document, not even a PDF, and send that version, because many of these applicant tracking systems, there can be hiccups if they are looking through a lot of graphics or formatting. Sometimes people will list, for instance, I place HR professionals, and there are certifications that HR professionals can obtain, and many people will say, I'm Michael Johnson, SPHR, Senior Professional in Human Resources. If they have added that at their name, sometimes the applicant tracking system will say that my name is first name Michael, middle name Johnson, last name SPHR. So I would keep things as clean and simple as you can, especially when you're submitting your resume through an applicant tracking system, because you don't want it to get caught up because of some sort of formatting or information where the system didn't expect it to be. The other thing about resumes is the keep it brief, but don't worry about some people used to feel like I'm trying to fit this all on one page. If you're somebody with 20 years or 25 years of experience, you're probably not going to summarize your entire history in a page. But you don't want it to be 3, 4, 5 pages either. You want to make sure that this is truly a summary of your skills and your work experience. So, try to use bullet points, try to keep it where you can, hit 3 or 4 different accomplishments in each of, like Richard said, maybe your last 4 jobs, and not write paragraphs, but have it be really scannable and readable and something that somebody can quickly pick up and look and say, yeah, I want to call him, I want to call her. That's the whole point of this. It's to get to a place where you're having a conversation, and then you can really be the person that advocates for yourself and get to the place where hopefully you're landing that job. So that's what I had. I don't know if there are any questions. Vickie, if I can answer,
thank you.
we have time.
First of all, that was really, really informative. I appreciate that. And I'm really glad that we had a kind of, as I say, both sides of the pond, because I think, yes, there are some similarities, but as we've learned, there are also very many differences. I'm sure a lot of the people in Europe and the Middle East and everywhere else is like, what? A human being doesn't see the resume, the CV, but it's more common than we think in the US, isn't it?
It's really common. I mean, most, I would say, especially mid to large size organizations will have some sort of applicant tracking system or some sort of, computer screening.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Exactly. Well, yes. So I do have a question right away before you even finish speaking. This is great. Michael, for the skills section, do you recommend succinct or many separated by commas for the ATS to pick up my resume? So my resume can make it through the HR to human. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, good question. I mean, often it's laid out in more of a graph format, and I think that's okay if it's just a simple graph. So you might list 9 or 12 different skills that you want to highlight, and they might be 3. And I have a cat coming to visit. It might be in 3 or 4 columns at the top of your resume. That's going to be fine with applicant tracking systems. What happens is if you choose a resume template that has builds boxes around those terms, or something that makes it more, it might look better in a graphic sense, that is what sometimes causes something to be held up.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I think just a simple, graph box is going to be fine.
Okay. And then I actually wrote down a couple of things. When you say quantify, sometimes, especially depending on the business that you're kind of pursuing, that can also be monetary, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Companies like to see how much money you brought into the company. I think for concierges, sometimes that's a little bit difficult. And as you pointed out, that's great that it's improved the star rating for the hotel or the scores that are coming back of guest experiences. But there are times I think that they can quantify how many people that they sent to their own hotel restaurant and how much revenue that increased for the hotel and things like that, right?
Yeah, the more that you can do that, especially when you're thinking of, even if you were applying within industry, you'd want to have give the potential employer a sense of the impact that you had. But when you're thinking about transferring to another career, you still want to be able to take forward and quantify those accomplishments. And the more you can do that, the better. I think resumes that really grab people's attention have a sense of, oh, this is like an accomplished winner. This is somebody that is on top of things, rather than looking at a resume and say, oh, they were responsible for this and they were responsible for that and they were responsible. That's great. You want the reader to have a sense of the context of the position that you held, but you want to give them also a sense of what you actually accomplished, and what impact you might have if you joined their organization.
Right. Wonderful.
Holly talked about being called to give a presentation for a company and thinking, even in her own mind, thinking like, well, why would they want that from me? And then having to shift the thinking and realize yeah, I can do this. This is what I can do. You know, that the more you can analyze what you've actually accomplished throughout your, work and life, the better you are at being able to carry that forward to a different kind of experience.
Right, right. Okay, I have a couple questions here that came in through the chat. As a concierge, we're used to using language that is direct, engaging, and straightforward. How do you approach online applications that use management speak, which is almost a foreign language?
Good question. I prefer direct, straightforward, and the kind of language that you're talking about, because I think you quickly get to the heart of what the need is, or what how to solve the problem for somebody. I would err on the side of going in that direction more than the management speak, but still I would get a sense of, if you're applying for a particular job with an organization, read that job description. Also look at the client's website. I call it client because they're my client, but look at the company's website and get a sense of how they communicate and who they are, what their mission, values, and goals are, so that you can understand that at least and try to be a little bit of a match. It's like working with guests who are coming from all different parts of the world. You probably pivot a little bit to figure out, how do I best serve this person, and with an understanding of where they're coming from. And that's important. That's important even when you're the applicant or the interviewee, understanding what that organization is seeking and how they communicate with each other.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have one more question for you. Do you have any recommendations or advice on cover letters?
I think my advice is also to keep to keep them very clear, brief, concise, and to lead with your best foot forward, in the sense that what is it that you want that reader to understand about what you can bring to them. So it shouldn't be a written, sort of a redigesting of your resume information. It should be, I'm pursuing this because, and here's why I think, what I can bring to your organization, what I'm excited about doing if I'm given the opportunity. It's really your first writing sample too to the potential employer. So you've got to make sure that the grammar is good, that there are no typos, you've written well. I've used Grammarly before. That was the tool that Richard mentioned. I have used that, but you want to make sure that it's it's going to reflect well on you, even from a writing perspective. But what you want to get across is how you can contribute to that organization and what your skill sets are that will make that happen.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. It's almost like your calling card, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm curious, actually, I have a question. What do you think it's, from your own experience, do they look at the cover letter or the resume first?
I typically look at the resume first. And then if the resume catches my attention, I read the cover letter. And if it's a well-written cover letter, it just sort of cements my commitment that I want to call this person and have a follow-up conversation. As a third-party recruiter, I've got to figure out how to solve my client's problem. They're looking for somebody to fill a particular need, and I have to figure out who has that ability. And sometimes it's not the most obvious. Sometimes it is somebody who, only after I have a conversation, I realize, oh my gosh, this is the person. This is the person that I want my client to interview, because I am confident that they're going to feel the same sense of excitement and engagement that I do. But you just have a couple quick opportunities to make that first impression. One is the resume, the cover letter, and then when you get to that initial phone interview, to make sure that works. And nowadays it might be it might be a video interview, not a phone interview or an in-person interview.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, I have one last question, and then we're going to move on to Debra.
Okay.
How do you best include a job work experience if you left the employer on maybe not particularly positive terms, especially if it shows the skills needed for the new job that you're actually applying for? So that's a good question. I mean, if you left the last position in not the best,
Yeah, there was something.
Relationship.
I would still include it because you do want to highlight, what you accomplished, what you did in that role. Unless, like I worked as a waiter one time for one day. I would never put it on my resume, but if it was really brief, but you want to leave it there. There's a difference between presenting, I spent, 3 years in this role and this is, what I accomplished. There's a difference between the resume and being presenting references. Now, maybe that's an employer that isn't going to be at the top of your first choice for a professional reference. You're going to go somewhere else where that there isn't whatever that conflict was or whatever that issue was, but I would still include it because it highlights the progression of your career and what you accomplished.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you so much, Michael. Again, just so informative. We're getting lots of nice comments just saying that this is really helpful to people. So I really appreciate that, which is actually a perfect segue to our next speaker, because we've talked about writing CVs and resumes. Now you get that call. You actually get to go in for an interview. Hallelujah. So our final speaker of the day also happens to be one of my oldest and dearest friends. I even sang at her wedding many, many moons ago. So we go way back. Debra Thompson is and always has been a dynamic personality of determination and drive. She has decades of experience in coaching and inspiring people through her years as a human resources executive on an international level. From hospitality to biotechnology, she has a talent for understanding people and bringing out the best in them. I am humbled that she is sharing her wisdom with us today, and I give you my wonderful friend, Mrs. Debra Thompson.
Oh gosh, I don't know if I can live up to all that. Great. Well, I was some couple things. One is I was just really glad to see all of the speakers actually looks like their photos. So we're going to talk about personal brand here in just a minute. And I think that was really exciting. And I'm going to try to weave some of the things that you guys heard today into my wrap up, because literally you kind of saw step by step, right? You have to take care of yourself first and be ready, to go whatever this next journey is. Your resume, your CV, it has one job, and that job is to get you an interview, which we're going to talk about. So, and then when you're there, I want you to just smash that interview. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, make sure that I get this right. Success, yes.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, and then I just need to do my presentation mode. There we go. Woo! All right. So we are, I'm going to change my earpiece over just so I'm ready. Okay. So we're going to go through a little bit about your branding, around communications, some tips around interviewing, and just the checklist. And that is some of these things were right on the handout that Vickie gave you. I'm so excited because we've had high retention of this during this entire morning. So if you guys haven't done it yet, I would stretch, stand up. You know, I like to do that, get that blood flowing. But we're going to really talk about you and your personal brand. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, let's, you know, again, I was thinking this morning as I was listening to Holly, just the unique things that you guys bring to the table. We're going to talk a lot about resilience, and I think we're going to talk a lot about resourcefulness, because my experience, and Vickie alluded to this, my very first job in HR was with Station Casinos in Las Vegas, and it was, you know, brand new, publicly traded, you know, locals hotel, and it was my first job in HR in a hotel in a casino in Las Vegas. Let that sink in. Talk about diving in head first. All of the issues that you can imagine with being in a gambling city we had in our employee population. But I think really knowing who you are is so important, because, and how it relates to the interview is just kind of being confident. You don't want to overtalk. You don't want to stumble. You don't want to be trying to say things that they want to hear, because that will really come off as inauthentic and, you know, sometimes actually desperate, which, you know, you may feel that way inside, but you don't kind of want, you know, people to know it. So, you know, one of the things you can just tell, right? I value optimism and joy, and I am just a real positive person. I think Vickie knows that about me, but every personality test, everything, every reference, people talk about my energy and my positivity. So if you think about a place like that might have more gravitas or more kind of disciplinary, maybe like a law office, I don't know. I don't think that kind of environment would work for me, right? So being clear who you are, I think is really important kind of going in. So thinking about your brand, you'll want to know that. And if I know you guys have been paying attention, but even, for example, if you guys saw when I had my profile picture, I had a thing about Movember, which is about men's health. I'm all about health, wellness, you know, nurturing people. And so trying to think about all of those things, your pictures, what you post on social media, those all should be reflective of you. So that's values. The next is about kind of passions. And this is, you know, what do you do when nobody's watching or when you have free time? Are you a reader? Are you a painter? Are you a fixer? Right. And again, being really, really clear about this. I can't tell you, interviewing people, one that just comes to mind, I was talking to somebody, said, so what do you like to do? What are you really passionate about? And this younger woman said, oh, I just, you know, I'm in a book club, I love to read. And I said, what are you reading right now? Dead silence. It's like, did she just say she's in a book club because I said I'm in a book club? I mean, you know what I mean? It didn't come off as authentic. And so thinking about what you're really passionate about, because people respond to people who are enthusiastic and care about what they do. And so knowing what your passions are. And then the third is personality traits. So you heard through the presentation today a lot of reference to this. And you see a lot of these kind of soft skills in job descriptions and what people are looking for. So what are those things that are particularly, you know, your strengths? And when we get to strengths-based communications in just a minute, I'm going to pick up on this thread a little bit more. But what are those things that are just come so natural to you? And if you don't know, ask a couple people that you've worked with and say, when you worked with me, what are like the 2 or 3 things that you remember? And so when you put all of these together, you kind of think about your brand and your value statement. And, you guys have heard things like elevator speech as an example, and you've heard about, just kind of that, your marketing message. This is all about you. And so, for me, and I'll just give you my example is, I know that my superpower is bringing out the best in others. And Vickie talked about it. I didn't even prompt her, right? But, that is kind of who I am. I think it makes me why I'm in human resources, right? And so when I put that kind of brand or together, it is absolutely to say, I am a builder. And I am an influencer. And my job and what I do best is I help organizations and leaders do their best work. And then it gives me an opportunity to kind of build on that, right? And so, I think it was Holly this morning when she talked about all of these skills and experiences, they are so transferable to so many careers. And so thinking about what's really important to you? What is it that you like to do? Right. And so if given the choice, what are you going to spend the time doing? Because that's the kind of work, if it's related, you want to do. If you like to go and look at open houses on the weekends, I think somebody talked about going into real estate. Oh my gosh. Vickie loves furniture and she loves decorating and she's done all this, I could totally see her being an interior designer as an example, if, her little thing with Alliants doesn't work out. Just kidding. But you really want to think about your values, your passions, and then personality. What are those things that just people want to know about you? So let's talk about strengths-based communications. So this is kind of rooted in actually a kind of psychology, which is that people, when given positive feedback, are more receptive and more, likely, obviously, to respond in a favorable way than when you focus on the negative, right? And so even in an interview, so I'll just kind of start by saying, and we'll get to this when we talk about STAR in just a minute, you do not know what that interviewer on the other end is going to be like. You don't know if he or she is a good interviewer, an experienced interviewer, or this is the first interview they've ever done, right? And so the extent by which that you can spend some time on the front end and have, and we'll talk about this later again, have kind of your playbook for you and your brand is going to give you the best chance to succeed when you're actually in there and you're going to kind of smash that interview. So for strengths-based communications, and I do a lot of work in this in human resources, it's just to stop focusing on the negative. Unless it's a derailer, unless there's something that you have been told by numerous people that says, if you don't change this, it's going to limit your career. One of the things when I was early on was, and I just want to tell you because I just feel like it just really helps as an example, is that early on in my career, I was a director at Station Casinos. It was one of my first jobs in HR. And I felt I was kind of an imposter, like I hadn't really earned it. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And one of the ways that insecurity showed in my communications is in an audience of people, when I were with people that reported to me, I always had to make sure that everybody knew that I was the boss in the room. Like, oh, Shannon, she is my, recruiter, or Mary, she works on my team. And what that did, I had a trusted advisor to tell me is that it feels condescending and like you're putting people in their place. So that was a derailer. And that was something that said, if you're going to really have a long career, you want to be more vulnerable and more humble, right? So I know I digressed a little bit, but that was an actual kind of weakness that said, this is really going to prevent me from having the impact that I want. So going back to the strength space though, again, you want to be in the driver's seat, right? And you want to make sure that you are spending as much time in that half hour, 60 minutes, 90 minutes that you have, focusing on those things that really make you qualified and that make you unique and what your strengths are. So I put a couple of phrases on here in terms of, how do you take almost any question and turn it into a strengths-based, kind of pivot, if you will. And so, for example, one question that you might get is, tell me about a time when you disagreed with your boss, right? And so they're immediately looking for, how you fight, right? Or how you argue, or, what was that? They're actually looking to see how you resolve conflict. So first of all, stop and listen and think about, okay, what are they really asking for? And so if you're using strengths-based communication, using that example, you could say something like, you know what, I work best when there is trust and honesty across all of the people I work with, including my boss. So hopefully when we have a disagreement, right, it's a safe place where I have, psychological safety, and that I can, and that I actually have, the ability to disagree. And then go right into an example of how you have and what you did. And we'll talk about STAR in just a minute, right? You might get a question about, failing, right? What was your biggest failure, right? That is framed in a way which is not strengths-based, right? Unless you switch it around, like on my slide there, from this experience, like, what did you learn from that? Everybody's going to make mistakes, right? And so what an interviewer is really looking for, and we'll talk about resilience again, is how you learn, right? Because no matter who they hire, no matter what person they've ever had in a job, you're going to make mistakes, right? And so you've got to figure out how you show to them, the type of person you are, based again on your character, right? On your competence, and you'll really want to frame things in a way that says, from this experience. So again, what was your biggest failure? I can tell you one of my biggest whatever is I sent a very highly confidential document to somebody. If you ever had auto-populate on email, you know what I'm talking about. If you know more than one person named Vickie, it's like, oh, I'm going to send this to Vickie. Oh, that was Vickie Adams, not Vickie Miller. And so one of my boss, Julie Cook, was not Julie somebody else. And I had a confidential spreadsheet with people's pay and sent it off. And I mean, I thought I was going to get fired from it. So again, if somebody's asking, about a mistake, this one is a simple one, but I just, I might use it as an example and saying, you know what, sometimes I don't pay enough attention to detail, and I'm working on it, right? And so this one time, I actually had a confidential document that I sent to the wrong person. And from this experience, I learned that in every little thing that I do in human resources, how it can have, extreme consequences. Every word, every email, every interaction I have can have consequences to the organization, and then maybe tell them the short story, right? And so those type of things where you think about how you continuing in the interview, right, to have and ask questions and respond to questions in a way that continues to, again, emphasize your strengths. And I'm going to talk a little bit about superpowers, because we all have them, right? And if you have not done strengths finders, so if you guys may or may not remember, a few years ago, I don't know, it's probably been 10 years ago now, maybe longer. I'm old, I can't remember. But there's a book that came out, Strengths Finders, and I think it even had a little disc that so it must have been 10 years old, and you put it in and you take a little test. Now it's all online. So the Gallup organization, it's called, I think I wrote it down the website. Let me just tell you, it is, it's just the Gallup organization, acquired Strengths Finders. And now there's a full online version that you can do. There's also versions of like Myers-Briggs, or there's one called 16 Personalities. And all these you can get either free or even a very low cost, where you can actually get a tool that you can do yourself to really say, gosh, what are those things that I just do that come naturally to me that are my superpower? And I already told you guys what mine is, and I just know it is. I bring out the best of people, and I create organizations and leaders that know how to that basically enable people to do their best work. That's it. right? And it's almost like I can recite it over and over. So what are those superpowers? What is the one or two things, right? That, one that I have a friend of mine, I mean, she is just super curious. Her superpower is she can ask any question in any way, like if they're, and her thing is she will always uncover, right? So I guess what I'm just like, she can always uncover the truth underneath, just because she's so super curious and asks a lot of questions. And if done in the right way, that can be a really powerful person to have on your team. So I'm going to try to get through some of these. And I don't know, Vickie, is there any questions yet that I should stop and ask for? Or should I just keep going? And you're on mute. Hello? Did I freeze?
I can still hear you.
Did I freeze?
Debra, we can still hear you.
Did I freeze? Okay, I'm gonna.
I think Vickie may have frozen.
Okay. I have a little, I can't see myself. I have a little piece of paper up top, so I can't see myself, and all of a sudden she froze. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going then, and she'll probably get back online, and at the end we'll ask some questions. So this next slide is, I love acronyms because, again, I'm old, I can't always remember things. And so I like little tools and things to remember things by. So this is a lot of the stuff that I'm showing, by the way. If you Google almost any of this stuff, there are literally hundreds of articles written about personal branding, about understanding your strengths, and STAR interview is an example. So what is STAR? And by way of example, I'm actually going to use an example when I was at Station Casinos to kind of walk you through this. This is really basically a way doesn't matter if you have an excellent interview that knows all about behavior-based interviewing to a person who is interviewing for the first time and asking you questions that you have no idea what they're asking. This method can be used over and over and over again, and you can really set yourself apart as an interviewee. So let's start with, let me click here. There we go, STAR. So the first is, okay, so you have a question, right? And so I'm just going to pretend that I'm an interviewer, and they ask a question to say, what's your philosophy, about customer service? What is customer service to you? If you're not prepared and you don't have a way of answering that, you could literally vomit at the mouth for probably 20 minutes about customer service, because all of you, I imagine, when I look at the audience and being concierge, that has been, again, one of your core values in who you are. You could literally talk for hours. Okay, so what's your philosophy about customer service? Okay, don't answer that question. Start by saying, you start by making some kind of declarative statement, right? Maybe it is the customer is always right, though that may or may not be true, right? But maybe it is something like, resolving a customer issue is something that I've always prided myself in, or something like that, right? So I'm just giving you an example, right? And so the STAR method then says, okay, so now you want to say why, and you want to give an example. So you say, let me give you an example. Start with the situation, short couple sentences, just so they know kind of, they can follow you in the interview. So when, I was working at the front desk a couple of years back, this mother of the bride came rushing up, right? And at the last minute, at the rehearsal dinner, the restaurant that they were going to had a gas leak. And boom, you've got 20 people with no place to eat, and dinner is in 2 hours. Okay, that's the situation. So then you tell them, what was your responsibility? So I'm going to use just this person that worked at the front desk, just in general, saying, my responsibility is, crap, they are a guest in our hotel, all 20 of them, they all have rooms, and the restaurant down the street has just canceled their rehearsal dinner. What is my responsibility? Okay, my responsibility is to go find an alternative place, right? I either need to find a restaurant, I need to find a meal, I need to go find something for 20 people now, which is going to help them, right? So that's what I was tasked to do. And what did you do? So you say in the interview, so this woman runs up, she comes up to the front desk, and 2 hours right before the rehearsal dinner, she says, the restaurant has a gas leak and they're not going to be able to serve us dinner tonight. Can you help? And I said, yes, I can. Get the details. The task is, I need 20 people. What kind of food? Whatever. And here's what I did. And so then you go ahead and say what you did. In the instance that I just mentioned, we had a restaurant that was only about 20% booked that night. And this was at Station Casinos. And the person immediately called the restaurant manager and said, can you book the back room? Can you whatever? We have 20 people, and immediately set them in the hotel with whatever, and went on. The next thing they did, right, is to go and call the hotel, or the restaurant that they were going to be sitting at, and said, so what's your chef doing tonight? What did you have on the menu? Do you still have the food? Okay, yes. Yep, you can come over to our kitchen in our restaurant and cook the food, and they can have their same menu. They can have their same, and by the way, you can bring your team. Now, I know you can't do that and everyone else, but doesn't this tell you a great story, right, about what the person did? And then the last thing, what was the result? How did it end? Okay, so the bride and the groom, and more importantly, the mother of the bride was ecstatic. Their whole family didn't have to leave the hotel. They had a nice setting. They had the food that they had ordered. And oh, by the way, you probably won't say this, but you probably got to get big tip at the end. But what I'm trying to say in this model, right, is that for every single question that you have, you can set yourself up to say, here's a situation, here was my role, here's what I did, and here was the impact. And it's just literally star every single time. And it is modeled after behavior-based interviewing. I won't go into HR speak with you, but really what it is that how do people know that you can do this job? How do they know that you can be successful? The best indicator of future success is past success. And so if you're able to, in an interview, really tell them time and time again how you could resolve a conflict with a coworker, address the needs of a customer, deal with a disagreement with your boss, correct a mistake that you made, right? You want to tell them with stories what you can do and what contribution that you can make should they decide to hire you. So my interview checklist. So the first is, prepare, right? You want to, and I think somebody said this earlier, you want to know something about the company. I cannot tell you how many times in my HR career people come in, and it's lucky if they can even know what company they're at. I work at a company called Assuragen. We're a biotech company. We do diagnostics for cancer and genetic disease. I mean, it is friggin' powerful work. And I'm just amazed that sometimes people will come into our office and really not even know what we do. So do your homework, right, about the company. And if you know who you're going to be interviewing with, hopefully you do, about the person, right? Because gosh, you could totally knock it out of the ballpark, smash it, as they say. Imagine if I'm interviewing and you're coming to interview with me, and you're interviewing for an accounting position. And you do a little research on me and see that I went to University of California at Berkeley, and you have a daughter that goes to UC Berkeley right now, right? So imagine if you're sitting in the interview and you're making, eye contact with your interview, and then say, hey, Debra, I see that you went to UC Berkeley. Yeah, I did. I have a daughter there, and then maybe ask me for some advice. People love their ego fed, right? And they love, so you're making connection, right? And you're really, so one, prepare, do your homework on the company, do your homework on the people that you're interviewing with, and do your homework on the job. So then you also want to make sure that you practice, right? And so I talked to you about the STAR model. I literally want you to think about, and you can Google this, Google 10 most common interview questions or something, and just start looking at all the most common interview questions. And then for every one of those questions, write out your STAR response so that you have at least 10 different scenarios of the ways that you have been able to be successful in the past relating to those interviews that are already prepared. Because you want to show some breadth, right? You don't want to just keep going back to, gosh, can you imagine if every question that they asked, I kept telling you about the mother-in-law, right? And the rehearsal dinner is like, wow, is that the only, irate customer you've ever had? No, you want to have a lot of different experiences to show what you've done. You also want to have your own list of questions, right? And I don't want to start by how much do you pay and what are your benefits, right? Or this is a big pet peeve of mine is, so what's the promotion track here? You haven't even gotten the job yet. You're asking me about how to get promoted, right? So your question should be around potentially the financial viability of the company. What happened to the person that was in this role before, right? So if you want to know about promotion track, you may actually get it by asking other questions like, so what happened to the person that was in here before? Oh, he was promoted to whatever. Oh, they promote from within, right? So there's a lot of answers you can get by asking the right questions. We talked about studying the job description. And I heard Richard and some other people who said, these keywords and phrases, if you've done if your resume did the job that it was supposed to do and you have an interview, now you're going to actually want to really hone in on the one or two really top things. And generally when people write a job description, not always, but the most important things are generally at the top. They're either on key responsibilities or key tasks, and you're going to be able to hone in on that. And then the other thing about prepare is drive the route or test the technology. Hats off to Vickie and the team. I got this email earlier this week, like, can we do a drive run? I'm like, oh, really? Yes, because it's important, because we had 80 some odd people on here, 100 people who were calling in and videoing in, and we were prepared, and Vickie and her team and the Alliance were prepared. So drive the route if you're driving, or check the technology in advance. So polish. And you guys, I told you about STAR. Now we've got the 3 Ps, prepare, polish, and then persist is the next one. So polish is arrive or log in early, not half hour early, but like 5 minutes. Don't make people uncomfortable. When, generally people are in meetings, they're back to back, but about 5 minutes is about right. If you happen to get somewhere even earlier than that, you could go in the lobby, you could use, the restroom or the laboratory, whatever you guys call it. But, try to be a few minutes early. Take notes during the interview. And remember, sometimes people can read upside down, so don't just write stuff that you don't want to be seen. But this is a really good trick to basically complement active listening, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But writing key phrases down and things that they said, and I'm going to tell you how to use that later. Things about perhaps the size of the organization, what happened to the person who was in the job before, little bits of information that the interviewer may tell you. And I'm going to tell you one, and then I'm going to come back to it. One time I was interviewing for a job, and the CEO told me that they were having a really hard time recruiting quality and regulatory people. And so I wrote quality regulatory, kind of a challenge, it's a difficult skill set to recruit from. And I made myself a note, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The other thing that writing does for you is it gives you time to pause and think about what you're going to say next, or pausing and listening. There's so many times when people are talking and we're already thinking about what we're going to say next. And sometimes just taking the art of just writing a couple things down and kind of listening, taking your eyes off and just pausing for a minute can just be such a powerful tool. So definitely take notes, and then also practice active listening. I saw before I got on, somebody wrote something about the kind of business jargon, how do you deal with all of these acronyms and business jargon, et cetera. So one, if you went and looked at a Shurigen website, I can tell you that there's a lot of stuff that you've never heard of. Look it up, number one. Number two, if somebody says something in an interview that you don't know, just stop and say, I think what you're asking me about is blah, blah, blah. Can you explain, right? asking a question like that is not going to make you seem ill-informed or inadequate. It's going to indicate to them that you're actually listening and that you're the type of engaged listener that actually wants to learn, right? So definitely engage in active listening. And then finally, at the end, kind of polishes, just make sure before you leave, that you have the contact information for the people that you're interviewing with. I've made that mistake before, and then sometimes trying to send a thank you note, et cetera. So that's the persist part, is to send a thank you note. I generally say within 24 hours. You don't have to do it, right when you walk out the door. In days when we were in line, when we were live and in person, I would do things like I might even write a thank you note and actually sit in my car and write it and bring it back in and put it in the receptionist or something. And especially if I interview with somebody and I know Vickie's like this, like you keep all the notes because they matter to you. And so if you're interviewing, and you guys remember this when you interview in person, if you're in somebody's office or something and they have things from their kids and they have drawings and they have thank you notes that they save, guess what? That means something to them. And so writing a personal handwritten thank you note can go a long way. But generally speaking, right now, it is perfectly acceptable. And even without COVID, it's perfectly acceptable to send an email, thank you note. You don't have to do a handwritten. It can take, if you're in the US post office, it could take a week or two until you get it, till the person gets it. So just know that you just kind of want to do, send a thank you note. Also, you might want to send along something that is interest to them. And remember what I said about active listening? So let's say I was in that interview and the CEO said to me, we're having a hard time filling quality and regulatory positions. And I kind of Google, I look up and I see, gosh, maybe there is an association, right, of regulatory staff, or maybe I read an interesting article about this, or what, maybe people are trying certain, packages or incentives, right? An article, right? And so just by following up and actually following up with something meaningful to them, again, it's just another way for you to make an impact. Using my example about listening and the person that had a daughter, right, or a son at UC Berkeley, if somebody said that to me, imagine if they said, hey, thanks for your tips on, whatever restaurant in Berkeley, my daughter went and it was great, or something like that, right? And so any way that you can somehow take what you've heard or a personal connection with that interview and turn it into something meaningful and valuable, again, it puts you a leg up in the competition. And then the last thing, persist, and it does not say annoy, by the way, it says persist, is that there's a couple things that, again, kind of not just pet peeves, but you're going to have the gamut of very professional organizations that say, I'm going to get back to you by Friday, and they're going to get back to you by Friday. Or they may say, you know what, we're running a little bit late, it's going to be next week. And there's going to be people that you never hear from again. I mean, it really is frustrating. And I know it is, but one is, know that your hour at home feels like days while you're waiting for a response. And when people are working, I mean, they'll tell you, I mean, even when we were getting ready for this seminar today, I'm busy at work, and sometimes, I come a day or two behind because I've got a lot going on. And you guys remember when you were working. And so that feeling of time is very different when you're looking for a position versus a person is working. And so give them grace, right? And always communicate in a way that feels very respectful of their time. And you can follow on, especially if there was a job that you interviewed, maybe you smashed the interview, you thought you did really well, and then you didn't hear anything. And all of a sudden now you've got another interview and they're offering you a job, but the job you really wanted was the first one. That's a great opportunity to say, hey, I realized you guys may have been busy, but I wanted to let you know that I have another offer on the table. Boy, we've almost lost candidates because, of that. And I've actually hired people when they gave me that little nudge and said, oh, I'm going to lose them. And it's prompted me into action. And so, and I'm an HR person, so I can tell you that, I mean, these kind of things work. So don't annoy, but do persist in a respectful way. And the other idea that I have that I've, seen I've done and that I've seen other people do is just find a way to connect. Certainly connect on LinkedIn. But, if you follow up with a communication, a thank you note or whatever, and you don't hear anything, or you find out that you didn't get a job, don't let that connection, just wilter and die. Because you know what? That person they hired may not work out, or they may have another opening, right? And so one of the things that you can do is send them articles that they read about their profession. Or I thought I thought about our interview. I hope you're doing well. I know it's been a while, but I thought you would enjoy this, article, for example. And so maybe, again, I'm going to go back to the UC Berkeley example. Maybe the person said, oh yeah, she's at UC, but she's getting ready to go to her master's, degree. She's going to go to law school. And so I see an article, right, about law school admissions or something. It's like, hey, I thought about you and your daughter the other day, and I thought I'd send off this article. So, I mean, again, you just really want to find creative ways that you can either build and connect, lead with business or lead with relationship. And either one is probably going to set you apart from the competition. So that, I think, is, I put this at the end, dream job, next exit, is, thinking about really clear what you want, making sure that, you show up as authentic, showing that, that you've done your homework, that you, again, I say vomit at the mouth because you can tell I haven't been known to do that a time or two in my life, is prepare, and then you'll smash the interview and get the job you want.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Debra. I know you lost me all for a moment there. I don't know what's going on. I live
That's
out
okay.
in the country, and sometimes I don't always have the best internet when we're having high winds like we are today. So I apologize, but I made my way back.
Great.
So as with other speakers, I'll give you a moment to put in any questions that you may have for Debra. But I was doing my active listening, and it was funny because when you talked about the STAR, the situation, task, activity, and results, I thought if there is a group of people who can give 20 examples of STAR right off the top of their head, it is concierges.
Exactly.
They are problem solvers. I've heard a funny story, and this is just a typical concierge story. One gentleman had a guest. I think he was like a fairly young movie star, and the concierge was relatively young as well, and both very tall, slender gentlemen. And the movie star got invited to go to a nightclub late in the evening, and all the stores were closed and had nothing perfect, like jeans. He was all in a business suit because he'd been at the hotel for interviews and movie junkets and things. And so the concierge looked at him and he says, I think we're about the same size. And they looked at each other and he says, right, okay, just give me an hour. He took his jeans from his employee locker, sent it to the hotel housekeeping, had them cleaned, and then gave the jeans to the guest to wear out. And he wore his uniform home.
Wow.
And I'm sure there are so many of these concierge stories that can absolutely relate. So remember those concierges, because you are definitely a plethora of stars in the making, no doubt. Also, the thank you notes. So I love that you touched on that, because that's something that I've always shared with people. And having also been in a position where I've hired trainers and such, I look for those thank you emails, those thank you notes, because to me, somebody obviously has taken the time, has been very generous with their time of where I'm interviewing to see me. And I need to acknowledge that. So I actually probably overkill. I send an email just because I know the mail takes a little bit longer, but I'll send a quick kind of probably a little less formal email just to say, thank you very much. But then I followed up the same day. I'll mail a thank you card, and I don't think that goes out of fashion. I don't think it goes out of style.
Yeah.
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 So,
And to your point, Vicki, I love to say that, just to say, thank you for taking your time. I know you're very busy here. I continue to be very interested in the job, and look for a thank you note for me in the mail. And
yeah.
and that's all you have to say. Absolutely.
Well, it's funny. While we do this, I do have to send a funny thing. Share a funny thing. As many of you know, I worked for Go Concierge for over 14 years, but I don't think a lot of you know how I got the job. It was still a relatively young company. It was just basically the founders and I think maybe one other IT developer, when they decided that they really needed someone to come in and do training full time. And I'd been a trainer for a Pacific Gas and Electric company, and I'd been a concierge. And when that came along and I saw that position, I thought, wow, how many people can say that they were both a concierge and a trainer? So I was the first person they interviewed. Yay, smashed the interview, but then they didn't hire me right away. I sent thank yous and they were like, oh yeah, we appreciate that. Please stay in touch. We're going through the process. We're still talking to people. And they said, do stay in touch, which was key to me because that meant that I could persist, as you say, without being annoying. But once a week, I would just send them a gentle little follow-up saying, basically, I'm still here. And after a month, my money was getting a little low. So I reached out to them and I said, because I knew they'd never filled this position before. And I said, I understand that, this is something new for you as well. I actually offered to work for them for free. I said, I feel very strongly that I can do this job. And if it's okay with you, I'll come in for a month. I'll do the work. And at the end of the month, if you're happy, pay me. And if you're not, don't worry about it. So to me, I was giving them a chance to kind of gamble almost. And that triggered something for them. I remember Adam coming back and saying, well, we can't not pay you, but we love your entrepreneurial spirit. And why don't we test the waters together? So they actually hired me as a consultant for 2 months. And then we knew that was a marriage, made in heaven. And I was with them for 14 and a half years until their acquisition. So, it's okay to think outside the box, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Good. So let's see, we've got lots of great comments coming back. I mean, everybody's just saying thank you so much and the insightful content. Love this so much. So this is great. I actually have somebody I interviewed here saying, didn't my thank you note help me get the job? Yes, absolutely, it did. Very helpful advice and great reminder. Let's see.
How to give the best Zoom interview.
There we go. Yeah, that's a
good one. So, you need to prepare your surroundings. Now, people are forgiving, right? If you've got kids and whatever, and in the US, I don't know how it is around the world, but most students are doing Zoom school. Most schools are going remote. And so we have just a lot of challenges, but you really want to put your time, get your space available. You guys, because I've been moving now, you can see this as a virtual background. It's not my office, but I put it up there because I'm in my daughter's room, and a picture of, Barack Obama with anyway, there's a lot of stuff in her room that would not look very professional, let's just say, if I were interviewing. So, use a virtual background if you don't have somewhere professional to sit. I'm looking at Michael, Richard, Vicki. You guys all have perfectly beautiful homes, but use one if your system will allow it. Set the time, make sure you're in somewhere quiet, get the lighting. You guys, I don't know what you think, but I can tell you, I have great lighting. I mean, I love Vicki, but I've got great lighting. I'm old and I laugh a lot and I have a lot of wrinkles, but you can get some good lighting. Smile.
And I look like I'm in a cave.
Okay, you're working on it. And try to look at the camera. And again, and it's okay to take notes. So those are just some quick tips. And maybe Michael and Richard, you guys have some other people who are on here want to add some things.
The good lighting is really important. And I tell people, think like a movie star, make sure that your face is well lit and you're ready in that way. So, and then look behind you and make sure that that's not distracting.
I just have one quick tip that actually I learned the other day when I was on a call. I have a remote camera, but most people will have a camera built into their laptop, so they can barely see where they should look. So if you put a very small sticky note with an arrow sticking down onto the camera pointing, your eyes are going to be attracted to that sticky note. So it's a good piece of advice that I heard. It's very good. So yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I would just say, and on behalf of Alliance Technical Support, I said it at the beginning of this meeting as well, but also if you're doing Zoom interviews, make sure your Wi-Fi is not being distracted by PlayStations or the television or other people's computer. Try and tell your family, I've got an interview and this connection can't break. Really just make sure, because the last thing you'll want is your connection dropping out all the time in what's going to be a really critical time, because it also just adds to the stress as well. So get your Wi-Fi well prepared, I'd say.
Especially when you're hosting a Zoom meeting like myself. All right. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I just want to thank you, Debra, of course, just wonderfully insightful. Thank you to all of our speakers today, Mr. Gatsby, the fabulous Holly Steele, who had to drop off a while ago, the wisdom of Richard and Michael, and of course, the inspiration of Debra. You have all been absolutely brilliant, and I'm so grateful to you. I have to thank my colleagues, Natalie Kramer, who our panelists have met, and she's kind of been in the background because she set up the Eventbrite that allowed you all to register for the event, as well as set up the Zoom meeting to facilitate the event. So I'm really grateful. And then Sebastian, whom you just heard from, who provided our technical support. And then finally, I have to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to attend today's event. We hope it's been proved informative and valuable, and will really help you on your journey to that next position. You know, we all know that these are challenging times, but take heart and know that there are many of us cheering you on and wishing you much success wherever the road may lead you. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.